The morning sun shone through the tall glass windows of a beautiful white mansion. Everything was peaceful, almost too peaceful for a day that was supposed to be full of happiness and love. The mansion was decorated with white roses, golden ribbons, and a huge banner that read, "Congratulations, David and Clara." Everyone was busy preparing for the wedding of David, a successful businessman in his 40s, and Clara, a charming woman who had entered his life only 6 months ago. To everyone, she seemed perfect, kind, polite, and deeply in love. Everyone, except one person, Ethan, David's 13-year-old son. Ethan sat quietly on the staircase, his small fingers nervously playing with the edge of his shirt. His eyes followed Clara as she moved across the hall, laughing with the guests. Everyone adored her, but Ethan couldn't shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't jealousy. He had wanted his father to be happy after years of loneliness. But there was something about Clara, something cold behind her warm smile, that made Ethan's stomach twist. 3 nights ago, he had overheard a conversation. Clara was on the phone, speaking in a low voice in the guest room. Her words were sharp, impatient, completely different from the sweet tone she used around David. "Yes, I told you, everything will be done after the wedding," she said. "Once I have access to his accounts, we'll disappear. He won't even know what hit him." Those words had burned into Ethan's mind like fire. He had wanted to run to his father immediately, but something stopped him. His dad loved Clara blindly. He wouldn't believe him without proof. Since that night, Ethan had been living with fear and confusion. He barely slept. He started following Clara secretly, watching her every move, trying to find evidence. He even sneaked into her room once, and what he found made his heart pound faster. Inside her drawer, under layers of perfume bottles and jewelry, was a small envelope with pictures of Clara with another man. They looked close, laughing together. In one photo, Clara wore the same ring she told David was her family heirloom. Ethan knew that ring now had a different story. He wanted to show those photos to his father, but the man in the pictures looked dangerous. And Ethan knew if he confronted Clara, she might destroy the evidence before anyone believed him. The wedding morning arrived faster than he expected. Guests filled the garden, photographers clicked endless pictures, and David looked happier than ever, wearing a white tuxedo with a nervous but bright smile. Ethan stood beside him, pretending to smile. His heart, however, was racing. He kept looking at Clara, who looked stunning in her lace gown. But her beauty only made her deception more frightening. As the ceremony began, Ethan could feel sweat on his forehead. The priest spoke softly, his father smiled lovingly at Clara, and everyone seemed lost in the moment, everyone except Ethan. He thought about what to do. Should he stop the wedding now? Should he shout the truth in front of everyone? What if he was wrong? What if it was all a misunderstanding? But then he remembered the photos. The phone call. The way Clara had looked at him when she caught him glancing at her that morning, a sharp, cold look that made him step back. She knew he was suspicious. And that meant he didn't have much time left. Just an hour earlier, something strange had happened. A black car had stopped outside the mansion gate. A man stepped out, tall, wearing sunglasses, and dressed in a black suit. He had handed a small box to the security guard and whispered something before driving off. Ethan had seen it from his bedroom window. His curiosity got the better of him, and he sneaked downstairs to check what it was. The box was plain, no name on it. When he opened it, his blood ran cold. Inside was a small USB drive and a note that said, "You don't know who she really is. Play this before it's too late." He had hidden the drive in his pocket, not sure if it was a prank or something more. But now, standing at the ceremony, he realized it might be his only chance. The guests clapped as the priest announced, "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace." A long silence followed. Birds chirped. The soft breeze moved through the flowers. David smiled at Clara, waiting for the priest to continue. But before the priest could speak again, a small voice broke the silence. "Wait!" Everyone turned their heads in surprise. Ethan stood frozen, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on his father. David frowned, confused. "Ethan? What's wrong, son?" The boy took a shaky breath. "Dad, you can't marry her." The guests began whispering. Clara's face stiffened. The priest looked uncomfortable. David laughed nervously. "Ethan, please, not now. We can talk later." But Ethan shook his head. "No, Dad. Not later. You have to see something. She's lying to you." The crowd gasped. Clara forced a smile. "Sweetheart," she said sweetly, "I know this is hard for you, but—" "Don't call me that." Ethan snapped. His voice trembled but his eyes were fierce. "I heard you. I heard your call 3 nights ago. You're using my dad." David blinked, stunned. "What are you talking about?" Ethan's hands were shaking as he pulled the small USB drive from his pocket. "This will show you the truth." The murmurs grew louder. Guests whispered among themselves. Cameras flashed. Clara's face turned pale for a split second before she forced another smile. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He's just a child, David. He's confused. He probably misunderstood something." But Ethan wasn't listening. He ran toward the sound system where a laptop was connected to play background music. With the help of one of the technicians, he plugged in the USB drive and clicked play. The screen came to life. At first, it was just static. Then, slowly, a video appeared. Clara was in a dimly lit room, talking to a man, the same one from the photos. "Once the marriage is done," she said coldly, "I'll transfer the money into your account. He trusts me completely. He doesn't even know I changed my name after the last time." Gasps filled the hall. David stood motionless. Clara's lips parted in disbelief. "That's not me," she shouted. "It's fake. Someone edited it." But the guests could see her face clearly. Her voice. Her words. There was no doubt. Ethan turned toward his father. "Dad. I tried to tell you." David's eyes filled with shock, pain, and anger all at once. He looked at Clara, who stepped back slowly, panic rising in her eyes. Then suddenly, she turned and ran. The guests screamed as Clara pushed through the crowd, heading toward the back exit of the mansion. David snapped out of his daze and shouted for the guards. Ethan followed, his heart pounding in his chest. Outside, Clara jumped into a car, the same black car Ethan had seen earlier. The engine roared, and the vehicle sped toward the main gate. "Stop her!" David shouted. But before the guards could react, the car crashed into the gate, breaking it open and disappearing down the road. The wedding was ruined. The guests were speechless. David stood still, breathing heavily, his tuxedo now covered in dust and sweat. Slowly, he turned toward his son, who looked frightened yet relieved. Tears filled David's eyes as he pulled Ethan into his arms. "You saved me, son," he whispered. "You saved my life." Ethan buried his face into his father's chest. "I didn't want to ruin your wedding, Dad. But I couldn't let her hurt you." David nodded silently, holding him tighter. "You did the right thing." But as the crowd started dispersing and the police were called, Ethan looked down at the broken USB drive in his hand. He thought it was over. But far away, on a hidden road, inside that black car, Clara's cold eyes glared at the rearview mirror. She wasn't done yet. She whispered to someone on the phone, "He ruined the plan. But he doesn't know the whole story. Not yet." And then the line went dead. The police cars arrived one after another, sirens echoing through the quiet neighborhood. Guests stood in shock, some still holding their phones, recording the chaos that had just unfolded. What was supposed to be a day of celebration had turned into a nightmare that no one would forget. David sat on the steps of his mansion, still in his tuxedo, staring blankly at the broken wedding arch. His hands trembled slightly. Everything he had believed about Clara was a lie, the love, the promises, the future they were supposed to share. All fake. Beside him stood Ethan, silent and pale. The boy's mind was heavy. Even though he had done the right thing, he couldn't stop feeling guilty for ruining the ceremony in front of so many people. He looked at his father, afraid of what he might say. David finally turned to him. His voice was calm but tired. "Ethan," he said softly, "you were brave today. You saw what I couldn't see. I should have listened to you earlier." Ethan looked down. "I didn't want to embarrass you, Dad. But I knew she was lying. I just didn't know how to prove it until now." David sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. "I don't understand how I could be so blind. She seemed so perfect. How could someone pretend so well?" Before Ethan could answer, a police officer approached them. "Mr. David, we've issued an alert for the woman. But she's vanished. No trace so far." David nodded weakly. "She won't get far. I'll make sure she pays for this." But the officer's next words sent a chill down his spine. "There's something you should know, sir. When we searched her background, we found that the name Clara Williams doesn't exist. It's an alias. She's wanted in 3 states under different names, for fraud, identity theft, and suspected connection to a missing person case." David's eyes widened. "A missing person case?" The officer nodded. "We're still confirming, but it seems she's not just a scammer. She might be dangerous." Ethan felt his throat tighten. Dangerous. The word echoed in his mind like thunder. He remembered her cold stare the morning of the wedding, the way she had looked at him as if she could see right through his soul. David stood up slowly. "Officer, please keep me updated. I'll cooperate with whatever you need." As the police left, the guests quietly went home. The mansion, once full of laughter and music, now felt empty and haunted. That night, silence filled the house. Ethan sat by his bedroom window, staring out at the moonlit driveway. His father was in the study, talking on the phone with the police. Everything should have been over. Clara was gone. The truth was out. But deep inside, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small note that had come with the USB drive. He hadn't shown it to anyone yet. The words were strange. "You don't know who she really is. Play this before it's too late." Who had sent it? How did they know what Clara was planning? And why did the message sound like a warning, not just against Clara, but something bigger? He turned the note over. On the back, written faintly in pencil, were 3 letters, MRC. Ethan frowned. He didn't know what it meant. Maybe initials. Maybe a code. He decided to keep it hidden for now. Hours passed. The clock struck midnight. David finally entered Ethan's room. His eyes were red, his tie loose, his expression heavy. "Can't sleep either?" he asked gently. Ethan shook his head. "Just thinking." David sat beside him on the bed. "I know this was a lot for you. You shouldn't have had to deal with something like this at your age." "I'm okay," Ethan whispered. I don't understand why she did it. Was it only for money?" David sighed. "People like her, they pretend to love because they want something. I thought she cared about me. But I guess I was just another target." There was silence for a moment. Then Ethan asked, Dad, what if she comes back? David smiled weakly, trying to reassure him. She won't. The police will find her soon. And we'll move on. But as he spoke those words, the light outside the window flickered, once, twice, then went out completely. The whole house went dark. David frowned. That's strange. The power never goes out here. Ethan's heart started pounding. He felt a sudden chill crawl down his spine. From outside, faint footsteps echoed on the gravel path. David stood up immediately. Stay here, Ethan. He grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and walked downstairs carefully. The beam of light cut through the darkness, landing on the main door. It was slightly open. Hello? He called out. No answer. The wind whistled through the hallway, making the curtains move like shadows. He stepped closer, every muscle in his body tense. Then, a soft noise came from the kitchen. A metallic sound. Like someone had dropped a knife. David's heartbeat quickened. He moved toward the kitchen and slowly pushed the door open. The flashlight flickered. And then he saw it, a photo lying on the kitchen counter. It was a wedding picture of him and Clara, from their rehearsal dinner a week ago. But across the photo, written in red marker, were the words. You took what was mine. David froze. What the hell? A cold breeze swept through the kitchen. He turned around, but no one was there. He locked every door, every window, and called the police again. But when they arrived, there was no sign of anyone. Just the photo. By morning, the mansion was filled with detectives. Ethan watched them from the staircase, his hands trembling. One officer spoke quietly to another. We checked the security cameras. The power went out at exactly 12:07 a.m. Just before that, a woman's shadow was seen entering through the back gate. The image is blurry, but it matches Clara's profile. Ethan's eyes widened. She was here? The officer nodded grimly. Looks like she came back for something. David clenched his fists. She's trying to scare us. But she's not getting away with this. But then, another officer approached with something in his hand, a small, folded paper found near the back door. He handed it to David. David unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was elegant, almost familiar. You think you know the truth, but you don't. I did what I had to. You'll understand soon, if you survive long enough. Ethan looked up at his father, fear in his eyes. What does she mean? David didn't answer. He couldn't. Because deep inside, he was starting to wonder, what if there was something more to this? What if Clara wasn't just a con artist, but part of something darker? That evening, Ethan was in his room again when he heard his father talking on the phone in the study. The door was slightly open. He could hear bits of the conversation. Yes, I got your message, David said quietly. I didn't tell the police about it yet. But I need answers. Who exactly is she? A deep male voice replied, though Ethan couldn't hear clearly. Then David said something that made Ethan's blood run cold. You're saying Clara wasn't working alone? The voice answered something Ethan couldn't catch, followed by David's tense whisper. Oh my God. MRC? It can't be real. Ethan's eyes widened. MRC, the same letters written on the back of the note. His heartbeat quickened. What was MRC? He didn't know it yet, but that small clue, those 3 letters, would soon drag both him and his father into a truth far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. As the night deepened, the wind howled outside the mansion again. Somewhere far away, Clara watched from the shadows of an old motel room. On her phone screen was a message that read, Phase 2 begins tonight. And just below it, a symbol, MRC. She smirked. Let's see how brave the little boy really is. The next morning, the mansion felt heavier than before. The air inside was thick with silence, the kind that made every sound echo twice. David hadn't slept all night. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a cup of coffee. Ethan watched him from the corner of the kitchen, worried but unsure how to help. The events of the last 2 days had changed everything. The laughter that once filled their house was gone, replaced by whispers of fear and doubt. Even the sunlight that entered through the window seemed dull and lifeless. David's phone rang suddenly, making both of them jump. He glanced at the screen, hesitated for a moment, then answered. It was the same man he had spoken to last night, the mysterious voice that knew about Clara. Ethan listened quietly, pretending to read a book, but his ears were focused on every word. Yes, I'm listening, David said in a low tone. You said her name wasn't Clara. Then who is she? The voice on the other side spoke slowly, almost too calmly. Her real name is Clara Monroe, but she's been using aliases for years. She's part of a covert organization called MRC, a group that targets wealthy individuals, manipulates them emotionally, and drains their assets before vanishing. David's grip on the phone tightened. Are you telling me she was part of some criminal organization? The man replied, yes. And your son, he's in danger now. Once she fails a mission, she tries to erase every loose end, including witnesses. David's face went pale. Witnesses? You mean, your son? Ethan saw her face. He exposed her. She won't stop until she gets what she came for. David felt his stomach twist in fear. He ended the call quickly and turned toward Ethan, who was now standing silently behind him. Dad, what's going on? Ethan asked softly. David hesitated, then knelt down and looked into his son's eyes. Ethan, we need to leave this house for a while. It's not safe here. Because of Clara? The boy whispered. David nodded. Because of Clara, and whoever she's working with. They packed only what was necessary, some clothes, documents, and the USB drive that had exposed her. As they walked toward the car, Ethan noticed something strange. On the windshield was a small note, held down by the wiper. His hands shook as he picked it up. The paper was damp from morning dew, but the message was clear: running won't help. MRC sees everything. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Dad, she knows we're leaving. David snatched the note from his hand, his face turning grim. Get in the car, he ordered. They drove off quickly, leaving the mansion behind. The long road stretched ahead, surrounded by tall trees and mist. Neither of them spoke for a while. David's eyes stayed on the road, but Ethan could see his father's hands gripping the wheel too tightly. Where are we going? Ethan finally asked. To my old friend, Michael, David said. He used to work with private investigators. If anyone can help us find out who's behind this, it's him. Hours later, they arrived at a small cabin on the edge of a forest. Michael was an older man, tall with gray hair and sharp eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. He welcomed them inside with concern. David, you look terrible. What's happening? David explained everything: the wedding, Clara's betrayal, the MRC connection, and the strange warnings. Michael listened carefully, then turned to Ethan. You're brave, kid. Most adults wouldn't have had the courage to do what you did. Ethan gave a weak smile, though his heart was still racing. I just wanted to save my dad. Michael nodded. You did more than that. You uncovered something dangerous. He then turned serious. The MRC isn't just a scam ring. They're professionals. They work like ghosts: no digital traces, no identities, no mistakes. If Clara was involved, it means someone very high up wanted your father. David frowned. But why me? I'm not a billionaire. What could they want from me? Michael hesitated, then said, it might not be about money. As night fell, rain began to pour outside. The sound of thunder echoed through the cabin. Ethan sat near the window, staring at the lightning as it lit up the trees. For a moment, he thought he saw something move outside, a shadow between the trees, tall and still. "Dad," he whispered. David came over, followed his gaze, and saw nothing but darkness. "It's just the wind," he said softly, though his voice didn't sound confident. Later, after dinner, they all sat in the living room. Michael connected his laptop to an old hard drive and said, "Let's see if we can trace that USB drive. Whoever sent it to you must have known something about Clara's plan." As he typed, Ethan felt uneasy. The air in the cabin grew colder. The power flickered again, just like before. Suddenly, the laptop beeped, a new folder appeared on the screen. The file name read, Project EM, Confidential. Michael's eyebrows raised. "That's strange," he muttered. "This isn't from my system. It's coming from a remote connection." "Can you open it?" David asked. Michael nodded, clicked the file, and a video began to play. The footage showed Clara sitting in a dark room, talking to someone whose face was hidden by shadows. Her voice was calm and confident. "He trusts me now. Once I get the documents, we'll have full access to the old research files." The man in the shadows replied, "Good. MRC needs those files back. They belong to us." The screen flickered, and for a split second, the camera caught the man's hand. It had a burn mark shaped like a circle with 3 lines through it. Michael paused the video. "That mark," he whispered, "I've seen it before." "Where?" David asked. Michael hesitated. "It's the MRC insignia. They were involved in experimental research projects years ago, technology, surveillance, even military data theft. They disappeared after a government raid. But it seems they're back." Ethan's eyes widened. "So Clara wasn't after our money. She wanted files?" David looked shocked. "But what files? I don't have anything like that." Michael turned slowly toward him. "Are you sure? You used to work on software security systems years ago, didn't you?" David nodded. "Yes, but that was before I met Clara." Michael leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Maybe that's why she targeted you." Before David could respond, a loud crash came from outside. Glass shattered. Ethan screamed as the window burst open and a small black device rolled across the floor, then exploded with a blinding flash. Smoke filled the room. David grabbed Ethan and ducked behind the couch as Michael reached for his gun. Through the haze, dark figures appeared at the door, dressed in black tactical suits with no insignia. Their movements were fast and silent. "Get down!" Michael shouted, firing a warning shot. One of the men returned fire, hitting a lamp. Sparks flew. The air filled with the smell of burning wood. David crawled toward Ethan, pulling him closer. "Run to the back," he shouted. They stumbled through the smoke, coughing, trying to reach the back exit. Outside, the rain poured heavily, drenching them within seconds. Behind them, they heard Michael shouting, and then, silence. David stopped, turning back, but Ethan grabbed his arm. "Dad, we can't go back. We have to run." Tears mixed with rain as they ran into the forest. The darkness swallowed them whole. Branches scratched their faces, and mud splashed under their feet. Behind them, flashlights flickered through the trees, and distant voices echoed, cold, mechanical, emotionless. They were being hunted. After what felt like forever, they reached an old wooden shed near a stream. David pushed the door open, and they collapsed inside, gasping for breath. "Dad," Ethan whispered, "who are they?" David looked at him, still shaking. "The MRC," he said. "They found us." Ethan swallowed hard. "Then they're not just after you, they're after both of us." David nodded slowly. And now, we need to find out why, before it's too late. Far away, in a dimly lit control room, Clara watched the live drone footage on a screen. She smiled coldly as the camera zoomed in on the forest where they were hiding. "They think they can run," she whispered. A man beside her, the same shadowed figure from the video, replied, "The boy has the key. He doesn't even know it yet. Bring them in alive. The project must continue." Clara's eyes glowed with vengeance. "Don't worry," she said. "I'll make sure they don't escape this time." And as the screen faded to black, the hunt for David and Ethan had only just begun. Rain poured down heavily as the cold night wrapped the forest in silence. Every sound, the dripping leaves, the rushing water, the cracking branches, seemed louder, sharper, more frightening. Inside the small shed near the stream, David and Ethan sat close together, shivering and soaked. Their breaths came in short gasps as the echoes of footsteps faded somewhere far behind them. For now, they were safe, but for how long, neither of them knew. David leaned against the wooden wall, trying to steady his breathing. His mind was racing. Everything had spiraled out of control too fast. The woman he loved had turned out to be part of something dangerous, and now they were being hunted for reasons he still couldn't understand. He looked at Ethan, whose face was pale and wet with rain. The boy was trembling, his eyes full of fear yet still shining with courage. David placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll be okay, Ethan. I promise." Ethan nodded weakly. "Dad, what if they find us? They have people everywhere." "Then we'll keep moving," David said firmly. "We can't stop now. Not until we know the truth." A flash of lightning lit up the shed for a brief second, followed by a deafening crack of thunder. The sudden noise made Ethan jump. "Dad," he whispered, "I can't stop thinking about what they said, about me having the key." "What does that mean?" David frowned. "I don't know, son. But it must be connected to whatever they're after. The files, maybe. Something they think you know." Ethan looked confused. "But I don't know anything." David stared into the darkness outside. "Maybe not yet. But we'll find out." They waited until the rain eased before stepping outside again. The ground was slippery, the trees bending under the weight of the storm. David led the way, flashlight in hand, scanning every shadow. They had to reach a nearby town, maybe find help, or at least contact the police again. But deep down, David knew it wasn't that simple. The MRC had already infiltrated everything. He couldn't trust anyone now. After an hour of walking, they finally saw faint lights through the trees, a small diner by the roadside. It was nearly empty, the neon sign flickering weakly. David pushed the door open, and a small bell rang. The warm air hit their cold faces, bringing a small sense of relief. A middle-aged woman behind the counter looked up. "You two look like you've been through a storm," she said kindly. "Sit down, I'll get you something hot." They nodded gratefully and sat at a corner table. As they sipped the coffee she brought, David noticed a man sitting at the far end of the diner, reading a newspaper. He wore a dark coat and a cap that hid most of his face. Something about him felt off. Ethan noticed it too. "Dad," he whispered, "that man keeps looking at us." David glanced subtly in his direction. The man quickly turned a page, pretending to read. David's instincts kicked in. He reached into his pocket, gripping the small pocket knife he carried since their escape. "Eat fast," he muttered to Ethan. "We might have to leave soon." Minutes passed. The man stood up and walked toward the counter, pretending to pay his bill, but David could see the small earpiece in his ear. The same type the men in black had worn at the cabin. He knew immediately this was one of them. David grabbed Ethan's hand. "Now," he whispered. They slipped out of the diner quietly, heading toward the back alley. But before they could make it far, headlights flashed behind them. A black SUV screeched to a stop. Two men stepped out. David pushed Ethan behind a dumpster. "Run when I say," he whispered. The men moved closer, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "David Keller," one of them said coldly. "You've made this harder than it had to be. Hand over the boy." David's jaw clenched. "You're not taking him." The man smirked. "You don't understand, do you? The boy isn't just your son. He's the experiment they've been looking for." David froze. "What are you talking about?" The man stepped closer. "The project you worked on years ago, the one you thought was cancelled. MRC didn't shut it down. They continued it. And your son was part of it." Before David could react, the man pulled a gun. Ethan gasped. David pushed him aside just as a shot rang out. The bullet hit a metal pole, sparks flying. David tackled the man to the ground while Ethan ran toward the woods. Another shot echoed. David shouted, "Run, Ethan! Don't stop!" Ethan sprinted through the darkness, his heart pounding in his chest. Branches tore at his clothes, mud splashed his shoes, but he didn't look back. He could hear voices shouting behind him, men chasing, dogs barking. He ran until his lungs burned. After what felt like forever, he stumbled upon an old barn at the edge of a deserted field. He pushed the creaky door open and slipped inside. It was dark and smelled of dust and hay. He collapsed on the ground, gasping for air. His hands shook uncontrollably. "Dad," he whispered. Tears filled his eyes. He didn't know if his father was alive or captured. The silence around him was unbearable. Suddenly, his pocket vibrated. His phone, it was a message from an unknown number. His hands trembled as he opened it. The message said, "Ethan, if you want your father back, come to the old research facility outside Pinewood. Don't tell anyone. Come alone." Attached was a picture of his father, tied to a chair, bruised, but alive. Ethan's heart dropped. "Dad," he whispered again, his voice breaking. He knew it was a trap. But he also knew he couldn't ignore it. Meanwhile, miles away, inside an underground facility, David sat tied to a chair, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. The man in charge circled him slowly. "You built the original security prototype that locked our system, didn't you?" he said coldly. David spat blood to the side. "I shut it down because it was illegal. You were using it to spy on people." The man leaned closer. "And now your son holds the access code. You hid it inside his DNA when he was born, didn't you? A security measure only you could design." David's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" The man smirked. "We know everything, Mr. Keller. You think you're the only one who's clever?" At that moment, a door opened, and Clara walked in, wearing a black coat, her face calm but her eyes cold. "He'll come for you," she said softly. "He always does." David looked up at her, disbelief and pain in his eyes. "Why, Clara? You could have just left." Clara's expression hardened. "You don't understand. MRC isn't just a group, it's survival. They saved me once, and now I owe them everything. But don't worry, David, after tonight, none of this will matter." She turned and left, her heels echoing down the metallic hallway. Back in the barn, Ethan sat in the dark, staring at the message again and again. Fear filled every part of him, but beneath it was something stronger, determination. He wiped his tears and whispered, "I'm coming, Dad." He found an old flashlight, checked the battery, and started walking toward Pinewood. The road was long and empty, and the wind howled through the trees. Every shadow looked alive. Every sound made him flinch. But he didn't stop. Hours passed before he finally saw the outline of a tall building hidden behind broken fences and overgrown weeds. The faded sign read, Pinewood Research Center, restricted area. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped through the gate. The moment he entered, the lights flickered on automatically. Cameras turned toward him, tracking his every move. His heart raced, but he kept walking. Somewhere inside, his father was waiting. He didn't know how he would fight an entire organization alone, but he knew one thing for sure: he wouldn't leave without his dad. Inside the control room, Clara watched the camera feed. "He's here," she said with a small smile. The shadowed man beside her nodded. "Good. Begin the extraction process. We'll get the code out of him, one way or another." Clara's smile faded. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. But she turned away before anyone noticed. The lights in the facility dimmed, and the doors locked automatically behind Ethan as he stepped deeper into the dark. The real game had begun. The cold air inside the Pinewood Research Facility was thick and heavy, filled with the faint hum of old machines still running somewhere deep underground. Every step Ethan took echoed down the long, empty hallway. The flickering lights above him created moving shadows that danced along the cracked walls. His heart pounded as he gripped the small flashlight tighter, its weak beam cutting through the darkness ahead. He had no map, no plan, only one goal in his mind: find his father. He walked past broken glass doors, shattered computer screens, and old folders scattered across the floor. Everything smelled of dust, metal, and something else, something chemical, like a memory of the experiments that once happened here. A distant metallic clang made him stop suddenly. He turned the light toward the sound, but there was nothing. "Dad," he whispered softly. No answer, just the faint buzz of electricity and his own rapid breathing. Then he noticed a faint red light flashing at the end of the hallway. As he got closer, he realized it was coming from a security terminal still active. The screen glowed faintly, showing a series of camera feeds. Ethan leaned in. His heart skipped a beat. On one of the monitors, he saw his father. David was tied to a chair in a small metal room, his head hanging low. Clara stood beside him, speaking to someone off-screen. Ethan could see her lips move, but there was no sound. He tapped the controls, trying to activate the audio, but the system was locked. On another camera, he saw several guards patrolling the hallways, all armed. Ethan swallowed hard. He couldn't just walk in there. He had to find another way. He looked around and noticed a map taped on the wall beside the terminal: Pinewood Facility Emergency Evacuation Plan. It showed different sectors: labs, storage, control room, and containment. His father was in the containment sector, the most heavily secured area. There was, however, a maintenance tunnel that connected the lower floors directly to that section. "That's it," he whispered. As he turned to leave, the screen flickered. For a brief moment, the feed changed to show something else: a dark room filled with strange tanks, glowing blue light pulsing inside them. He saw shadows of people moving, or at least, what looked like people. He blinked, confused, and the feed returned to normal. "What was that?" he muttered. He found the maintenance door a few minutes later. It was locked with a digital keypad. Ethan stared at it, unsure what to do, until suddenly, the lock clicked and the door opened on its own. A small light blinked on the wall beside it. Someone had unlocked it remotely. Ethan froze. Was someone helping him, or leading him into a trap? Still, he had no other choice. He stepped into the tunnel. The air inside was damp and cold. Water dripped from the pipes overhead, and the sound of machinery echoed faintly from below. Ethan moved carefully, following the tunnel's curve until he reached a ladder leading upward. He climbed slowly, peeking through the grate above before pushing it open. He found himself in another hallway, this one clean, bright, and clearly still in use. He hid behind a metal cabinet as two guards walked past, talking quietly. "They said the extraction process starts in 30 minutes, one guard said. "Yeah," the other replied. "They're gonna take the code from the kid. Once it's done, the father's useless." Ethan's stomach twisted. They were planning to use him? He pressed his back against the wall, his breath quick and shaky. He waited until the guards disappeared around the corner, then slipped out and moved toward the sound of distant voices. As he reached the end of the corridor, he saw a large window overlooking a lab below. His eyes widened. The room was filled with high-tech equipment, computers, glass containers, medical chairs, and inside one of them stood Clara. She was staring at a holographic screen showing DNA sequences, her expression cold and focused. Beside her stood the man who had captured David earlier. "We'll begin soon," the man said. "Bring the boy in once he enters the main corridor. He'll come straight here, his father is the bait." Ethan stepped back, his heart racing. They knew he was coming. The unlocked door, it had been part of their plan all along. He turned to run, but suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed everywhere. "Intruder detected," a robotic voice announced. "Security lockdown activated." Metal doors started sliding down, one after another, sealing the corridors. Ethan ran, jumping through just before one door slammed shut behind him. He turned a corner, only to come face to face with Clara. She didn't look surprised to see him. "You shouldn't have come here, Ethan," she said softly. "Where's my dad?" he demanded. "What do you want from us?" Clara sighed, her voice calm but tired. "You really don't know, do you? You're not just David's son. You're the result of his greatest experiment, Project Genesis. You were born with a code in your DNA, a code that can access and destroy everything MRC ever built." Ethan's eyes widened. "That's not true. I'm just a normal kid." Clara shook her head. "Normal? You've never been normal. The memories you lost when you were little, that wasn't an accident. Your father erased them to protect you." Ethan felt dizzy, his mind spinning. "You're lying." "I wish I was," Clara said quietly. "But now, they're going to extract that code from you. And once they do, they won't need you or your father anymore." Before she could say more, David's voice echoed from somewhere down the hall. "Ethan! Run!" Clara turned sharply. Guards appeared behind her. Ethan took the chance, he sprinted past her, dodging bullets that cracked against the walls. The hallway lights flickered as he ducked into a side room. It was small, filled with old equipment and a broken control panel. He looked around desperately, searching for a way out. Then he noticed a small vent near the floor. Without thinking, he crawled inside, dragging himself through the narrow tunnel just as the guards burst into the room. He moved through the vent system, his arms aching, heart pounding. Through the grates, he could see parts of the facility, rooms filled with computers, strange experiments, and even pods that seemed to contain human-like figures floating in liquid. "What is this place?" he whispered. Finally, he reached another vent that opened above a large room, the same one where his father was being held. David looked weak but alive. Clara stood beside him, facing the control terminal. The man in black approached with a syringe filled with glowing blue liquid. "We'll get the access code now," he said. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. He couldn't wait any longer. He kicked open the vent cover and jumped down. The guards turned in shock as Ethan grabbed a metal pipe from the floor. "Stay away from him," he shouted. The man smirked. "Ah, the boy arrives on time." He raised the gun, but Ethan swung the pipe with all his strength, knocking it aside. The gun fired, hitting a control panel. Sparks flew, and alarms blared again. David shouted, "Ethan, get out of here." "No!" Ethan yelled. "I'm not leaving you." Suddenly, the entire room shook. The damaged control panel began to overload, lights flashing wildly. Clara screamed, "It's overheating. The reactor's unstable." The man in black cursed, running toward the exit. David broke free from his restraints, his hands bleeding. He grabbed Ethan's arm. We have to move, now. They ran as explosions began to echo from below. Smoke filled the corridors as systems shut down one by one. Clara watched them flee, her face pale. She hesitated for a moment, then turned to the computer and pressed a sequence of commands. If the facility goes down, she whispered, they'll never find him again. She hit enter, and the entire security grid went offline. As David and Ethan reached the exit doors, another explosion ripped through the building, sending them sprawling to the ground. Ethan coughed, trying to get up. His father pulled him to his feet, and together they stumbled out into the cold night air. Behind them, the Pinewood facility burned, flames lighting up the sky. Ethan looked back, tears streaming down his face. Dad, what was all this? Who am I? David put a hand on his shoulder, his eyes filled with pain. You're my son, Ethan. That's all that matters. But deep inside, he knew the truth was far more complicated, and that this was far from over. The sky was still glowing orange from the burning facility as David and Ethan stumbled through the woods, exhausted and drenched in sweat. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Every breath they took reminded them of how close they had come to death. The flames behind them flickered through the trees like angry ghosts, lighting their path as they kept moving deeper into the forest. David's arm was bleeding, and his shirt was torn. Ethan walked beside him, holding his father's hand tightly, afraid to let go. After an hour of walking, they reached a small clearing. The sound of sirens echoed faintly in the distance, fire trucks, police, maybe even MRC agents arriving at the ruins. David sank down beside a fallen tree, wincing in pain. We can't go any farther tonight, he said weakly. Ethan knelt beside him, worried. You're hurt, Dad. David gave a faint smile. It's just a scratch. But Ethan could see it wasn't true. The wound was deep, and blood was still seeping through his shirt. He tore a piece of cloth from his sleeve and pressed it against the wound, trying to stop the bleeding. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The forest was quiet now, except for the rustle of leaves in the cold wind. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Dad, what did she mean? Clara said I'm not normal. That I was part of some experiment called Project Genesis. What does that mean? David stared at the ground, his face pale in the moonlight. He looked older than Ethan had ever seen him. You deserve the truth, he said quietly. He took a deep breath. Years ago, before you were born, I worked for the MRC. I was one of the lead scientists on a government research project. They told us it was for medical advancements, a way to repair human DNA and prevent disease. But it wasn't. They were trying to create something far more dangerous, a biological key that could control any encrypted system in the world. Instead of passwords, codes, or chips, they wanted to use human DNA as the key itself. It could open every database, every military system, every piece of classified technology. It was power beyond imagination. Ethan's eyes widened. And you built it? David nodded slowly. I designed the framework. I called it Project Genesis. But when I realized how it could be used to control governments, erase evidence, manipulate people's lives, I shut it down. I destroyed the data, or at least I thought I did. But MRC kept a copy. They restarted it in secret, and they needed a living host to carry the code. His voice trembled slightly. That's when you were born. Ethan froze. His heart pounded in his chest. Me? He whispered. David nodded again, tears glistening in his eyes. You were supposed to be safe. I hid the final encryption pattern inside your DNA, the last piece that completed the system. Without you, they couldn't activate it. I thought if no one knew, they'd give up. But they found out. Clara was sent to get close to me, to watch us. I just never thought she'd become part of our lives the way she did. Ethan stared at him in disbelief. She pretended to love you? David's jaw tightened. Maybe at first. But there were moments when I thought she truly cared. Then she disappeared for a year, and I learned the truth. She was working with them all along. When she came back, I should have known it wasn't for love, it was for you. Ethan's stomach twisted. The memories flooded back, the fake smiles, the strange phone calls, the way Clara always seemed too interested in him, asking questions about his dreams, his headaches, his health. He had thought she cared. Now it all made sense. He looked away, his eyes filled with tears. So I'm just an experiment? David reached out and held his shoulder. No. You're my son. You were born because I wanted a family, not because of a project. The code may be inside you, but it doesn't define who you are. Ethan didn't speak for a while. He just stared at the ground, his thoughts spinning. Then, a faint noise made both of them look up, a distant hum, like a drone. David's expression changed instantly. They found us, he whispered. He stood up, wincing in pain. We have to move. They ran again, through the trees and across the dark field, as the sound of engines grew louder behind them. A bright light suddenly flashed over them, a drone searchlight sweeping through the forest. David pulled Ethan down behind a rock. Stay down, he said. But the drone was fast, it hovered above them, the light locking onto their position. Seconds later, the sound of vehicles roared closer. David looked around desperately and spotted an old service tunnel half hidden under some bushes. There, he said, pulling Ethan toward it. They climbed down just as the agents arrived at the clearing above. The tunnel was narrow and dark, filled with the smell of rust and old water. Ethan's heart raced. Dad, where does this go? I used to work here, David said between breaths. This tunnel connects to an abandoned outpost near the river. If we make it there, we might have a chance. They kept crawling until they reached a small chamber. Old lights flickered faintly, revealing a rusted console and a stack of dusty boxes. David leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. We'll rest here for a bit. Ethan nodded, but something in the shadows caught his attention, a small device blinking weakly on the console. He walked closer. It was a transmitter, still active. Before he could react, a voice came through. Ethan. I know you can hear me. Ethan froze. He recognized that voice. It was Clara. I know what you think of me, her voice continued. But it's not that simple. They're coming for both of you. You have to trust me now. Go to the old bridge near the river at dawn. I can get you out of the country. It's your only chance. David shook his head. No. It's a trap. Ethan hesitated. But what if it's not? David looked torn. She's lied to us before. Ethan's voice trembled. She saved us at the facility. She could have killed us, but she didn't. David didn't respond right away. His eyes were full of doubt, pain, and exhaustion. Finally, he said quietly, We'll go. But if she tries anything, we run. Ethan nodded. Hours passed slowly. The night felt endless. Finally, as the first light of dawn crept over the trees, they made their way toward the river. Mist floated above the cold water, and the bridge stood silent and broken, half covered in fog. A car was parked at the far end, its engine off. Clara stood beside it, wearing a gray coat, her face pale and unreadable. When she saw them, she took a slow step forward. You came, she said softly. David kept his distance, his hand protectively on Ethan's shoulder. Why are you doing this? He demanded. Clara sighed. Because it's over. The facility, the project, it's all gone. But they won't stop. They'll rebuild, and they'll come for him again. The only way to protect him now is to disappear completely. I have contacts overseas. I can get you new identities, a new life. David stared at her, unsure. And why should I believe you? Clara's voice broke slightly. Because I owe you that much. Because once, I did love you. I didn't plan to, but I did. And I can't let them destroy what's left of our family. Ethan watched silently, torn between anger and hope. David studied her face, searching for truth. After a long pause, he nodded slightly. If this is a trap, Clara, I'll make sure you regret it. She met his gaze. I know. They got into the car, and Clara started the engine. The road ahead disappeared into the fog, the river glimmering faintly beside them. For the first time in a long while, there was silence, not the silence of fear, but of uncertainty. Neither of them knew where this road would lead, or if it would ever end. But for now, they were still together, and that was enough. Behind them, far in the distance, a black SUV pulled out of the woods. A man in a dark suit picked up a radio and said quietly, "They took the bait. Keep your distance until I give the signal." The chase was far from over. The road stretched endlessly through the fog, winding between tall trees and quiet valleys. The early morning sun had barely risen, casting a gray light over everything. Inside the car, there was silence. David sat in the passenger seat, his eyes fixed on the misty horizon. Ethan sat in the back, watching Clara through the rearview mirror. Her face looked calm, but her fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, betraying the storm inside her. The air felt heavy, as if everyone in the car carried their own secrets, and none dared to speak them aloud. After an hour of driving, Clara finally broke the silence. "There's an old airstrip about 20 miles ahead," she said softly. "A plane will be waiting to take you both out of the country. New names. New lives." David didn't answer. He just stared out the window. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "And you?" he asked. Clara smiled faintly. "I'll stay behind. I have things to finish." Ethan frowned. "They'll come for you. You helped us escape." "I know," she said quietly. "But I made my choices long ago." The car turned onto a dirt road surrounded by thick woods. The fog grew denser, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. David glanced in the side mirror, and his heart sank. Two black SUVs had appeared behind them, speeding through the fog. "Clara," he said sharply, "we're being followed." Clara looked in the mirror and cursed under her breath. "Hold on." She pressed the accelerator, and the car sped forward, kicking up dust and gravel. The SUVs closed in fast, their engines roaring. Bullets shattered the rear window, glass spraying across the seats. Ethan ducked down, covering his head. "Dad," he shouted. David turned back, his eyes fierce. "Keep your head down, son." Clara swerved sharply to the right, barely missing a fallen tree. The car bounced violently, tires screeching as they hit the uneven ground. David reached for the glove compartment and found a small handgun, Clara's. He gave her a quick look. "You expected this, didn't you?" Clara didn't answer, her jaw clenched. "Just trust me," she shouted, turning the wheel hard. They sped through the forest road, branches slapping against the windshield. The SUVs kept coming, relentless. "We can't outrun them," David yelled. Clara's eyes darted toward a narrow trail leading downhill. "Hold on," she said, turning sharply onto it. The car skidded down the muddy path, bouncing over rocks and roots. The SUVs tried to follow, one of them lost control and crashed into a tree, bursting into flames. But the other stayed close. Ahead, the road ended at an old wooden bridge that stretched over a deep ravine. The boards looked rotten, barely strong enough to hold the car's weight. Clara didn't slow down. "Clara, no!" David shouted. But it was too late. She drove straight onto the bridge. The wood groaned and cracked under the pressure. The SUV behind them stopped at the edge, its driver watching as the bridge swayed dangerously. Clara kept going, her hands tight on the wheel. They made it halfway across before a loud crack echoed through the air. The bridge collapsed. The car plunged downward, crashing through branches and landing hard in the shallow river below. Water splashed high, covering the windshield. For a few seconds, everything went black. Then Ethan's voice broke the silence. "Dad! Clara!" David groaned, pain shooting through his arm. "I'm okay," he said weakly. He looked over. Clara was unconscious, her head bleeding from a cut. Ethan pushed open his door and crawled out, shivering in the cold water. The car was half submerged, smoke rising from the hood. He helped his father out, then dragged Clara onto the shore. She coughed weakly, opening her eyes. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked. Clara nodded faintly. "We have to move, they'll find us soon." David looked around. The ravine walls were steep, but there was a narrow path leading upward. "Come on," he said. They climbed slowly, helping Clara as she stumbled. When they finally reached the top, the forest opened into an old industrial area, rusted buildings, broken fences, and a half-collapsed tower. David frowned. "This place. I know it. I used to work here years ago." Before they could move further, a voice echoed from the shadows. "Welcome back, David." Ethan froze. From behind a stack of metal crates, the man in black stepped forward, the same one who had captured David at the facility. His dark coat was torn, but his eyes burned with cold fury. Behind him, several armed men emerged, surrounding them. David stepped in front of Ethan. "Let him go. I'm the one you want." The man smirked. "Oh, I don't want you anymore. I want him." He pointed at Ethan. "Do you have any idea what he's carrying inside him? The code isn't just data, it's evolving. It's becoming something new. Something alive." Ethan's heart raced. "What do you mean?" The man smiled darkly. "Haven't you noticed, boy? The headaches, the flashes, the times when machines reacted to your emotions? You're not just a key. You're the program itself, and soon, you'll activate." David's face turned pale. "That's impossible. I disabled the trigger sequence years ago." The man shook his head. "You tried. But when the system overloaded at the facility, it reactivated. The countdown has already begun." Clara's eyes widened. "How long?" "Less than 12 hours, the man replied. "And when it completes, his body will rewrite itself, and every encrypted system on this planet will be under his control." Ethan took a step back, his heart pounding. "No, that can't be true." David's voice was full of pain. "Ethan, listen to me. No matter what happens, you're still my son. You're stronger than what they made you." The man raised his gun. Touching. "But it's over." Before he could shoot, Clara suddenly moved fast. She pulled her own weapon and fired twice. The man staggered, clutching his shoulder. "Run!" Clara shouted. Ethan grabbed his father's hand, and they bolted toward the abandoned tower. Bullets flew past them, hitting metal and concrete. They ducked behind a wall as explosions echoed through the yard. Inside the tower, it was dark and full of rusted machinery. David leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. "We can't keep running forever," he said. Clara closed the door behind them and locked it. "There's something here," she said. "Something that can stop the activation, a manual override device. I hid it years ago." Ethan looked at her. "You knew this would happen?" Clara hesitated. "I hoped it wouldn't. But I had to be ready." They climbed the narrow staircase to the top floor, where old computers and cables lay scattered. Clara searched through the debris until she found a small metal case. She opened it. Inside was a strange-looking device, glowing faintly blue. "This is it," she whispered. "If we connect it to him before the transformation completes, we can stop it. But if we fail..." David finished her sentence quietly. "It'll kill him." Ethan froze, staring at them. "You're saying I could die?" Clara looked at him sadly. "If we don't do it, the world will fall apart. If we do, there's a chance you might not survive." David stepped forward, his eyes filled with pain. "No. There has to be another way." Clara shook her head. "There isn't. The sequence is already running. Look at him." Ethan looked down at his hands. They were faintly glowing, lines of light pulsing beneath his skin like circuits. He felt strange energy moving through him, cold and powerful. He backed away, terrified. "Dad, what's happening to me?" David reached for him, his voice breaking. "Ethan, look at me. You're still you. We'll fix this. I promise." Clara connected wires from the device, her hands trembling. "I can stabilize it, but we have minutes, not hours." Outside, the sound of engines and footsteps drew closer. The agents had found them. The man in black's voice echoed through a loudspeaker, end of the line, "David. Hand over the boy, or everyone dies." David's heart pounded. He turned to Clara. "Do it." Ethan shook his head. "Dad, no." "What if I die?" David took his son's face in his hands. His voice was firm but gentle. "Then you'll die saving everyone. And I'll be right here." Clara pressed a button. The device hummed, and a surge of energy surrounded Ethan. His eyes glowed bright blue, the air vibrating with power. He screamed as the floor shook violently. The machines around them sparked to life, lights flickering. Clara shouted, "Hold him still." David wrapped his arms around his son as the light intensified, flooding the entire room. Outside, the agents shielded their eyes as a massive wave of energy burst from the tower, cutting through the sky like lightning. The world seemed to freeze for a second, and then everything went silent. When the light faded, Clara looked up slowly. The room was filled with smoke. "Ethan," she called softly. There was no answer. David knelt on the floor, holding his son's limp body in his arms, tears streaming down his face. The faint glow in Ethan's skin began to fade. But just as David's tears fell onto Ethan's face, the boy's eyes flickered open, glowing softly, not blue this time, but golden. And in that moment, every machine in the tower powered on by itself. Ethan was still alive. But something inside him had changed. The air was thick with smoke and the sharp scent of burned metal. The sound of crackling electricity filled the old tower as lights flickered across the walls. David held Ethan close, afraid to move, afraid to believe what he was seeing. His son's eyes glowed faintly gold now, steady and calm. The glow wasn't cold like before, it was warm, almost human. Clara stepped closer, her face pale and streaked with tears. "He's stable," she whispered, staring at the readings on the flickering screen. "It worked, but the system's different now." David looked down at Ethan, his voice trembling. "Ethan, can you hear me?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, Ethan opened his mouth. "Yes. Dad. I can hear you." His voice sounded the same, yet it carried a faint echo, as if two versions of him were speaking at once. He blinked, confused but aware. "What happened?" David brushed the dust from his son's face, smiling through tears. "You saved us, son. You stopped it." Clara turned toward the shattered window, watching as the fog outside began to lift. "The signal's gone," she said softly. "The network's offline. The activation failed. It's over." But deep down, all three knew it wasn't truly over, not yet. A sudden metallic noise echoed from below. The agents were still there. The man in black was limping toward the tower, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "You think it's over?" he shouted. "He's not human anymore. You can't stop what's already begun." David stepped in front of Ethan, shielding him. "You're wrong. He's my son. That's all that matters." The man laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what he is now. That boy is the future, and that future doesn't belong to you." He raised his gun. But before he could pull the trigger, Ethan stood up. The golden light in his eyes brightened, and every metal object in the room began to hum. The man's gun jerked upward by itself and flew out of his hand. The tower walls vibrated with power. Ethan's voice was calm, but powerful. "I know what I am," he said. "And I choose what I become." A burst of energy exploded outward, pushing the man back violently. He hit the ground, unconscious. The remaining agents outside froze as their weapons powered down, their vehicles shutting off one by one. The entire area went silent, no more machines, no more hum, no more control. Ethan fell to his knees, breathing heavily. The glow faded slowly until his eyes were just as human, gentle, tired. David rushed to him, pulling him into a hug. "You did it," he whispered. "You ended it." Clara approached carefully. Her hands trembled as she looked at the readings again. "His systems are offline, he's free now. No control. No signal. Just him." She smiled weakly, tears filling her eyes. "You're safe." But then her face changed, her expression softening with something unspoken. David noticed. "Clara? What's wrong?" She hesitated. "When I activated the override, I linked my own code to the system to stabilize him. It was the only way. When his energy pulse spread, it erased all connected data, including mine." David's voice cracked. "What are you saying?" Clara smiled sadly. "It means I won't last long. The connection kept me alive after the experiments, but now it's gone." Ethan's eyes widened. "No! We can fix it. You saved us, you can't just." She shook her head gently, walking toward him. "Ethan, the world you just saved needs hope, not ghosts from the past." She reached out and touched his cheek softly. "Promise me you'll live your life, not as what they made you, but as who you are." Tears streamed down Ethan's face. "I promise." Clara smiled faintly, her eyes growing distant. "Good boy." Then, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the tower's broken roof, she collapsed. David caught her before she hit the ground. Her body was still, her expression peaceful, like someone finally set free. Outside, the storm clouds cleared completely. The sun rose higher, bathing the ruins in golden light. The birds began to sing again, their voices gentle and full of life. Ethan stood beside his father, staring at the horizon. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. David looked at him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We start over," he said. "No more lies. No more running." Ethan nodded slowly. For the first time, there was no fear in his heart, only peace. He turned to look at the destroyed tower one last time. The wind brushed through his hair, and for a moment, he thought he heard Clara's voice whisper faintly through the air. "Be free, Ethan." They walked down the hill together, the morning light warming their faces. The danger was gone. The machines were silent. The world, broken but breathing, had been given a second chance. And as father and son disappeared down the long dirt road, the camera slowly panned upward, showing the sunrise stretching across the horizon, bright and endless, a new beginning born from the ashes of the past.